I dare say upsetting, but I think that is the correct word, or worrying.
Oh, this is so difficult to choose.
This thing is pretty wacky.
Yeah, it's really fun.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the Covenant Wars, and we were missing a couple because they were taking their sweet time bringing them into the Shadowlands Alpha, but everything is here now, and now we're starting to look at how that's going to change over time. So let's finish these off then, Mr. Finn, who's joining me once again. We are missing Paladin and Rogue, and we're only actually missing Night Fae and the Necrolords here. So I'll kick off with the Necrolord Paladin. The Vanquisher's Hammer throws a hammer at your target, dealing some spell power as shadow damage and empowering your next. So if you're Ret, your Templar's Verdict automatically triggers Divine Storm. If you're Holy, Word of Glory automatically triggers Light of Dawn. And if you're Protection, Word of Glory automatically triggers Shield of the Righteous. Having playing with this, incredibly practical, the most visually underwhelming of all the Paladin abilities. Well, not all of them, but it's okay. I mean, playing it as Ret, you get so many procs that it doesn't really make much of a difference to Ret at all. You know, having this extra Divine Storm go off, like Ret just is a proc machine. I have to say, though, playing as Holy and Protection, it was actually really nice. There's a weird moment you have when you're playing Protection where you're like, I need to heal myself, but I'm also getting smashed in the face. Being able to do both of them at the same time on command, really, really nice for Protection, because you felt comfortable saying, oh, I do need to heal, but I'm also going to put on my Shield of the Righteous as well. Same for Holy. Certainly most group contact, Finn, having AoE at the same time as you're doing a single target heal is actually perfectly nice. You often run into those scenarios. I don't know if you felt the same way about it.
Yeah, definitely. Definitely feels better to use as Prot and Holy. As Ret, it just feels... It feels less like it matches up what you're wanting to do. You're very rarely wanting to cast AoE and single target at the same time. Whereas for Prot and for Holy, it just felt like the two abilities synergize a little bit better. So yeah, generally pretty good. But in comparison to the other Paladin ones, not that interesting.
No, it's kind of the opposite swing of the hammer. Is that it's very practical, but that's it. Like, and it doesn't do much. You basically throw a Hammer of Wrath, but it has a kind of a green swirl around it. That's about it. And other than that, there's nothing to it. It's dull, practical. It's all right. I mean, I can't get excited about Vanquisher's Hammer in any way, shape, or form. It's all right. It works.
Yep, same.
Yeah, unfortunately we couldn't say more to it, guys, but that is it. But on the other hand, we have a lot to say about the other Paladin ability, which is the Night Fae ability, which is the one that is, I dare say upsetting, but I think that is the correct word, or worrying. Certainly a lot of people who care about progress in this game, which is the Blessing of Seasons. And I would say this is also worrying a lot of Holy Paladins in particular about this ability. The Blessing of Seasons is a single button, and then when you press it, it will give you a buff for 1 minute. It only has a 15-second cooldown, though, so you can cycle through these buffs rather quickly. But if you do press the button again, it replaces the buff that you previously had. We have Blessing of Summer, we have Blessing of Autumn, Blessing of Winter, and Blessing of Spring. All of them have different effects. Mr. Finn, do you want to take us through what these things do and why this is actual nightmare fuel?
Yeah, I mean, you'll have to excuse me if I don't get these perfect, because the stuff on Wowhead is off a little from what's actually
they have changed them in game. What they do. Not that it's helped, but the tooltips have changed for this.
Yeah, so the Blessing of Summer is actually a flat holy damage buff in Alpha.
Yes.
So it gives your abilities a high chance to do, I think it's like 250 holy damage or something like that. But it obviously scales how you level. This, yeah, we'll get to it later. But yeah, that's what that one does, right? There is another one, which I believe is Autumn, the healing one. Is that?
I think it is Autumn.
Yeah, the Autumn's
in fact,
the healing
I think
one.
Autumn's. I mean, this is by the by, but because they all do the same sort of thing. But I think Autumn's actually the damage one now, and Summer's the healing one. I think it's something like that. Yeah, they just swap them around.
Either way, right? I'll just run through what the four are, and we can talk about them. So, yeah. So the other one, it gives like a healing done and healing received buff to your party members, so just the 5 people in your party, not in your raid, but it's 10%. So 10% additional healing and 10% additional healing done.
Using quick math, it's 20.
Huge. At least 20.
Yeah.
I think that's how percentages work. Then you've also got another blessing that when you attack enemies, you reduce their movement speed and attack speed.
Yep.
I believe that is still Blessing of Winter.
I believe so too, yes.
And the Blessing of Spring, movement speed of enemies are reduced by 20% and their attack speed's reduced by 10%. And then Blessing of Spring is the last one, and Blessing of Spring reduces your cooldown recovery time by 10%. So the wording is it causes your cooldowns to recover 10% faster, but essentially you get 10% off your major CD if this is up. So
it's up, yeah.
If it's up.
It's very strange. We did some interesting tests with Guarding the Ancient Kings and only managed to knock about 20 seconds of it over 5 minutes.
Yeah.
Because obviously the buff only lasts 1 minute. So once that buff is off, it stops reducing the cooldown duration. So it does alter. You can't just fire off a cooldown when you have Blessing of Spring and it will get that benefit. It's only when it's up is it actually in effect. So it gives you a really variable... It's shit. Let me just sum it up like that. It's absolute shit. It's total waste of time. And you're never going to sit with this buff up for 1 minute. That's never going to happen.
Yeah, it just doesn't really do anything. It's fairly similar to the winter one, the movement speed and attack speed. I don't think you're going to sit with that up either.
Well, the problem with this, Finn, and this is where we're going, is that the other two are so much better that the other two are a waste of time.
Yeah.
And that's the problem we've run into here.
Yeah, there's so many issues with this one. I hate this spell so much. I cannot explain how much I hate it. So there's a few weird interactions that we should cover off first. If there's 2 paladins in your party, they override each other's aura.
Yeah, once we managed to get them both up, but I think it was a lag on the server.
Yeah, I think there was something wrong with the server at that point. But, so if I press summer, and then Mike presses winter, his winter will override my summer for the party. Assuming we're in the same group.
Get fucked.
So that's frustrating, first off. I think that doubling them up would be worse, but that is annoying. What it means is that if you have 2 paladins in the same group, they're going to have to desync their auras before the pool. Yep. And you'll probably not even press your aura for like a minute. You'll just be sat with no aura active. Because
you will have one because the other guy is giving you one.
Yeah, because the other paladin in the group will have his turn. we messed around with this a little bit, and we basically worked out that in a 5-minute fight, you can have 4 minutes of one specific aura with a 45-second gap in the middle.
Yeah, there's one 45-second gap where they immediately cycle back through all the other 3 to get back to the other one, and then they leave it waiting for the other one to wear off. So essentially what we're saying is, Blessing of Summer, if we come back to that, is actually about a 15% DPS increase for the party.
Yep, for everyone in the party. Yeah.
It's huge. It's absolutely enormous. I have no doubt it's going to be nerfed and made into something less. But right now, this stands at a 15% damage increase for the party. And as Finn just said, there was talk, because this was something we all read, and theory crafting started happening, that every single raid in Shadowlands would need 2 paladins per group. And that was kind of the discussion that was going on, is that's 8 paladins in a mythic raid in order to just manage this one buff, because it is so strong. Because we have the 15% damage increase, but if it wasn't possible to overwrite, you could have 15% damage increase for your party, as well as having 10% healing received and 10% healing done by the Holy Paladins in that party and the Prot Paladins, which is a ludicrously powerful buff. That's encounter breaking, right, Finn?
Yeah, and even when it does overwrite, I still think it's encounter breaking. There's just so much wrong with this. There's so much management involved. That's the main part that makes me hate it. I would never want to play this, ever. Because you're going to have weak auras and ERT notes explaining exactly when you need to press your button in order to give 4 other people a decent buff. Which I don't think feels good.
If I could spell this out for the guys, because we were just talking about 2 paladins as a group, that still is kind of maybe a thing.
Yeah.
And as Finn was talking about desyncing there, so what you would have is 1 paladin put up Blessing of Summer. That's the 15% damage increase. while the other one just sits, wait, and his next press is going to be Blessing of Summer. So the Paladin 1 will use Blessing of Summer for 1 minute. Then when it runs out, Paladin 2 uses his Blessing of Summer. And then when that runs out, both of the Paladins immediately press their buttons together to cycle through autumn, winter, and spring as quickly as possible until Paladin 1 is ready to activate Blessing of Summer again. So that takes 45 seconds with this 15-second cooldown to cycle through the other 3. Then that Paladin 1 once again activates his Blessing of Summer for 1 minute, while the second Paladin then waits because he doesn't want to overwrite that Blessing of Summer. And then as soon as the Paladin 1's Blessing of Summer is gone, Paladin 2 then activates Blessing of Summer. And then that's how you get what Finn was talking about there, which is a 15% damage increase for the entire party for like 4 minutes and 15 seconds of a 5-minute fight. 4 minutes, sorry, they only last 1 minute. But you get the idea. This is the kind of shenanigans this Covenant ability has potential to cause. And it's boring as fuck.
I mean, I hate
which is even worse.
It's so dull. It's going to be even worse if it has to line up like that. You're going to spend more than half the fight not even using yours, which sucks. I don't know why. This is just a terrible spell. It needs to not be a thing. As soon as physically possible, just remove this from the game.
I agree with you, Finn. I think instead of trying to make this work, one, it's not a cool idea at all. It fits Night Fae because you've got all this seasonal thing, although there's no real winter or anything going on there. It just needs to go. It's super boring. It's incredibly dull. It leads to so many problems that don't need to exist. Or they're going to have to nerf it to the point where it's irrelevant to everybody, which is even worse. Like, there's just no point to this spell being in the game at all. There's nothing but issues with it. And I'm really hoping they just fucking burn it to the ground, because there's no Paladin out there. Oh, there's always somebody. I should never say that. But there aren't many Paladins out there that want to give up Divine Toll, even Vanquisher's Hammer, or even the Venthia Mega AoE, so they can have a buff button that they have to just press to buff their party, or utilize themselves every now and again. Like, I don't get why this is in the game. It actually blows my mind.
It's crazy to me. There's a lot of these, like, the Priest Night Fae one is fairly similar. I think this is even more obnoxious, though. It being a party buff is just so stupid. I know that the party buffs are a thing going back to vanilla, but they just don't function anymore. It's such a weird requirement to put on something, and it limits classes that don't have party buffs from getting spots. And we've spoken about this before, but like, you should be able to play whatever you want, and abilities like this stop you from playing whatever you want.
For sure, this is the most prime example of everything wrong with the Covenant system. Is an incredibly dull buff that's incredibly powerful and has the potential to also really rigorously put you into a playstyle that isn't really much to do about your class. You're basically playing this buff. That's your role. Is to play the buff, not to play your class. Like, that helps, but realistically, you're there to be a buff bitch to literally everybody, and just to press this button and then follow a weak aura, and then when it says press now, press it, and that's it. You might as well be an autonomous robot at that point, and doing stuff in between is fine, but the fact is, make sure that party has that 15% damage bonus, because that's going to, and also it breaks encounters. There's no way Blizzard can even remotely balance or create a fight that makes any sense when one raid group is doing 15% more damage than the other raid group. Yeah. That's weeks and weeks and weeks of gearing to even come close to that. And there's just no way that works. Like, it literally screws up the game. So I really hope that, I want it to just go. I don't want them to go like, well, we'll only make it 3% and it's not that bad. Like, no, just get rid of it. It's terrible. It needs to go.
I mean, any percentage is going to be pretty obnoxious, so it just needs to not be a thing.
Really horrific. I suppose we should pick. What is our favorite? I mean, what is our favorite Paladin ability? Yeah, Divine Toll.
Oh, this is so difficult to choose. Divine Toll, yeah, obviously.
Divine Toll. Kyrian for the Paladin, every single step of the way. I don't even understand the Venthia one. Still, they've changed it. I still don't get it. The Necrolord one is just too boring. Like, it's very practical, but that's not fun. I get it. In a really practical world, sure. But if I want something that I'm going to enjoy every single time, it's going to be Divine Soul, without question.
Agree.
Let's go to the rogues then. So the rogues have had a rough time. So I just want to pass comment here that the rogues in Torghast are still unfinished. Why they added the rogue to Torghast, I don't know, because most of their abilities aren't in there. So that's why you've not seen any footage of us doing a lot of rogue Torghast, or why you've probably not seen any other content creators doing a lot of rogue Torghast. The rogue has been kind of left behind, Finn, would you agree? In terms of most of Shadowlands, they seem to be kind of the bastard child at this point.
Yeah, there's not much changed with them, really. I don't know whether that's a good thing or not. If I'm honest, I don't play a huge amount of Rogue on live, but they don't seem in a particularly awful state.
No, they're just okay.
They're playable.
I feel like other classes are just so much more fun right now.
Yeah.
Like the Rogues feel stagnant. It's nice to have sub back where it is, but yeah.
They definitely, out of the melees, they definitely feel like one of the worst ones at the moment. To play anyway, think not that, necessarily like damage-wise, but fun-wise for sure. It's
not helped that their Covenant abilities, nearly all of them we've checked up until this point, have been really half-arsed.
Terrible.
Yeah, they've been half-arsed. They don't really work well with the specs. Like it feels like somebody didn't play all 3 rogue specs, made them. So, it's a bit silly. Let's talk about the Necrolord one. Serrated Bone Spike, which you've had some the most experience with. Yeah. Embed a Bone Spike in the target. It deals 60% of AP as physical damage every 5 seconds until they die. Does apply a dot. Attacking with Serrated Bone Spike causes all your active Bone Spikes to fracture and strike your current target, increasing initial damage by 100% per spike. It's 10 energy, 30 yard range.
Yeah.
This thing is pretty wacky.
Yeah, it's really fun. It hits like a truck once you get a couple of stacks. It also, what it doesn't say, I think in here, is if they die, the charge resets.
Yeah.
So if basically you can fire out so many on lower health targets because they die so frequently, you just end up casting it again over and over and over. The one thing it made me think of, do you know the new John Wick movie where he's just throwing knives into people in one of the fight scenes over and over again? That's what it feels like. You're just literally chucking bone spikes at the guys until they die. So yeah, it's really cool. It's a really fun ability. I think it's got a ton of uses, especially in M+. Getting bone spikes out on little targets and then hitting your main target with a big buffed one is really nice, and it has the added bonus of it just ticks damage on them forever until they die, which is also kind of nice. So yeah, I think generally it's just a really nice spell to use. It's fun. It's kind of hilarious. I think it's maybe a little bit overtuned right now.
It feels it for sure.
Yeah, you kind of end up. Yeah, you end up just spending that and finishers like over and over again, pretty much, because it just generates so many combo points, and it's kind of nuts at this stage. But yeah, it's going to be fun to press regardless.
Yeah, for sure. It's a really nice combination of things. It feels like in certain scenarios it's crazy, and then other scenarios it's not so much, which is kind of the idea they did want to go through with the Covenant abilities. They didn't want them all to be amazing. They wanted this puzzle solution where, yeah, sometimes the guy who chose Sepsis is going to be in a better position than you are, and not Sepsis, the bone spikes is going to be a better position, but on the next boss, somebody else is going to be in a better position, and therefore choose the one you enjoy the most. Like you said, though, in dungeon environments, this feels pretty crazy, and considering Venthia and Kyrian have this wonky interaction with how they work, or are just basically copies of Envenom that we've seen with Venthia, it doesn't seem to work out quite as well. This seems more reliable, more controlled, but it does end up dominating. Certainly something you noticed when you were doing some Torghast with it is that it ends up just dominating your entire play.
It's a bit like Condemn for warriors in that way. You just end up pressing this and kind of only this. So it'll obviously feel different on like big health bosses and stuff, but without being able to test it in a dungeon or in a raid, it's kind of difficult to say. All I would say is that it seems to do a lot more damage than most of the other Covenant abilities right now. So it chunks, and you pretty much only press this button and then your finisher. So it's kind of fun to use still, though.
Over at the Night Fae, then, we have Sepsis for the rogues, which is really cool. and also really irritating sometimes.
Yeah.
Which is a real pain in the ass. So we've got the infect the target's blood, dealing 125% of attack power and nature damage over 10 seconds. So it applies this dot. If the target survives that full duration, they suffer additional 313% damage, and you vanish from sight. Cooldown reduced by 60 seconds if sepsis does not last its full duration, which means you can run around and really spam this onto targets and immediately plant the dot on them every single time. And then if that dies, you basically have sepsis up all the time. So keep putting on targets and dotting them and getting it working. This is going to be great in raids, I think, for bosses.
Yeah.
This is going to be very cool because obviously with another vanish, there are so many things you could do with an extra vanish as a rogue. The problem I had with it, Finn, is solo play, that vanish, if you put it, because you obviously want to use this on a big target, so if you go against a rare, or you go against a really high health enemy, that vanish does reset the mob back to full health. You can spam every button as it's about to run out and kind of cancel your own vanish, so to speak, and it will kind of keep it in combat, but if you're not really on the ball, this thing, like, you go up to a target, right? You blow cooldown. So if you're outlaw, you go like adrenaline rush, roll the bones, slice and dice. You put up the new crit debuff, the between the eyes debuff, and then you put sepsis up, and then it vanishes you. You lose all your cooldowns, and it goes back to full health. And you're just like, well, there you go.
Yeah, it's kind of frustrating that way. I think that it's a huge burst CD for rogues.
Yeah,
it's kind of crazy burst CD actually. With an additional vanish. So I think generally on bosses it's going to be awesome, but you're right, solo play it's super frustrating. Torghast it's kind of frustrating as well actually, because even the mobs that have true sight still reset.
Yes, they do. It's really one of these weird abilities that just, it seems like such an oversight. But the vanish is so good that I imagine in most play, I don't know how I feel about an ability that kind of doesn't make sense if you're not in a group. Right? So there's other people keeping the mob in combat. But then again, when I think about world questing and stuff like that, it's fine. Because there's usually more people attacking anyway. And in fact, sepsis does so much damage that it kind of kills the mob. And and it resets. So you can keep spamming it, right? So it's got this kind of one caveat that you need to be aware of. And I guess it'll come down to, if you want sepsis and you're thinking about it, what content do you do? So if you're doing mainly group-based content, you're fine, right? If you're not bothered about not being able to use sepsis on, say, an open world rare, okay, you're fine. Although it does feel odd that you would pick up a class ability that could cause you this kind of problem. It feels, because I remember the first time I used it and it did it, and I was like, oh, what? That's really annoying. That feels like it makes no sense. But I also don't want it particularly changed, Finn, because I know how much good it could do to have this extra vanish on a minute and a half cooldown.
No, I do like it. I think I would be able to get over the solo quest and solo play stuff, just because it's so useful in dungeons and raids. I think it's just going to be really strong.
Yeah, I worry we come at it from people who raid and do dungeons as a norm. That doesn't bother me. It doesn't bother me, but there's a lot of people out there who don't, and that's something. So your mileage is going to vary. That's all I'm going to put out there, is your mileage is going to vary with the Necrolord ability. So it's something you definitely want to consider is your style of play. Let's put it in your hands rather than us trying to decide for you. So that's the final one. That's every single Covenant ability looked at. Finn, what do you want to place your flag with the rogues? Because it's a little tough.
Oh, Necrolord.
Yeah, it's not that tough.
I don't think it's that tough, actually. Yeah, Necrolord.
No, it's consistent and it works. Yeah. It works all the time. It's very consistent. It's fun to play with. That is the way to go. I really do like the idea of the Kyrian one. If you forget the Kyrian one, it's where you get a second combo point meter and you need to kind of match. But it just plays out so badly. Like, in reality, it just doesn't work out, and it really gets on my nerves. But the idea of it is kind of fun.
Yeah, it's frustrating to play with, even though the base idea is kind of... it's alright. I don't think I would like to play around that at all.
Yeah, and slaughter poison is very edgy.
Yeah, pointless.
Very edgy. Yeah, it's pretty pointless, unless they do something spectacular with it, which... they haven't yet, let's put it that way. It's a little boring just to have a different poison. And certainly when that poison literally just does instant poison damage. It makes no sense yet. I'm sure that one's on the chopping block. Or not on the chopping block, but subject to change. As are most rogue things. Rogue things are probably something we're going to vamp. But there you go, guys. That's every single Covenant ability across Covenant Wars. Our comparisons, our discussions after playing with them for many, many hours. That's as much as we can give you on this. That doesn't mean it's the end of the series, though, because what I'm seeing right now, Finn, and I don't know if you feel the same way, we're getting a lot of class changes right now. Significant class changes. And one thing that we've noticed is that class changes have a domino effect onto the Covenant abilities, which then has a domino effect onto the Soulbinds. So I wonder if Blizzard is tackling it in this kind of order where they're going to do class changes and say, okay, that's kind of the class changes done. We're going to lock that in there. Then they're going to come back to the Covenant abilities and say, right, what do we need to change here based on how the classes now work? And then they can go to the Soulbinds.
I mean, I hope so, because there's a lot of classes that still need a bit of work. So I hope that's what they're doing. But yeah, you're right. There's definitely some interactions with Warlock and Shaman that we've seen already in particular, where it might not necessarily change the Covenant you would go for, but it makes some of them less good or less bad than they were before. Yeah. So yeah, there's definitely some more iteration to be done on these. And there's some of them that just need to be thrown on the fire and forgotten about forever.
I think the best we could let you guys know who are following this is we're doing quick looks again when they do these significant class changes. We will mention the Covenant abilities a little bit in there, but we'll look at when they start actually tweaking these things. Because right now, a couple of them have had some very minor tweaks, if not just making them work, has been what they've been trying to do. But I have no doubt Blizzard has a wave planned where they're going to go through all the Covenant abilities and start making some dramatic adjustments. As you've seen through our testing, the conclusion is still the same. We pretty much fell into the same category that there are clearly better than others. Some of them almost feel dead to some of the classes, and certainly into the spec point of view, some of them feel very much like waste of time or things that you would actually be suffering if you pick those up. So let's hope Blizzard has something to do with those. We would have liked to have seen more variety here, Finn, when we started this series about a month or so ago.
Definitely, yeah.
But that hasn't happened. So we'll leave it there. We'll be back when we've actually got something to share with you. But that's the chart as it stands right now. And we'll see you again when it's